That's one set. Um, I don't have one. It's all magic. Okay. Glad everybody's here. Deb, did you get one of these, Deb? Okay. Joe, grab one of these. They're up here. Oh, there you go. Okay, so just so you know, before we even start, I want to go over what we handed out to you guys, okay? This is a fourth step inventory sheet. Do not write on these. Do not write on these. You have 4 sheets here. And you'll understand why you have 4 sheets in a few minutes. But so when you go home, make yourself some copies so you have an extra copy to give to somebody you're working with later, and a copy that you can start writing on. Now, me and another guy made these up almost 30 years ago. We wrote these up. It took us a few weeks of arguing back and forth on what should be on here. And we actually spent 2 days of arguing on how big of a space should be in between the thing. I'm not kidding you. You remember John Legassi, Kelly? Yeah, that's a long time ago. Him and I did these. So these have been all over the world and all over the country. And you've probably seen these or something similar to these before. But what I'm going to tell you is, without a doubt, when you fill this out and you go through the instructions with us at the end, you're going to be able to understand your 4th step like you've never understood it before. Now, if you choose to use any other method to do a 4th step, that's fine. This is the easiest, most accurate way. This, if you follow this here, you will be able to pinpoint the exact nature of your wrongs, which is the whole purpose of the 4th step. The whole purpose of 4th step is to, figure out the exact nature of your wrongs. So everything except for the instructions right here, the instructions just tell you how to fill this page out. But everything else on this page is directly out of the big book. Okay, there's nothing that's on here that's not in the big book. Now, if you look at this sheet, the first thing you probably notice is there's 5 columns. And the big book has 3, right? And one of the misunderstandings of the 4th step is that people tell you to write your life story. You do not write a life story on the 4th step. This is and people tell you to inventory everything, all the good and all the bad. You do not inventory good stuff on the 4th step. There's nowhere in this book that it tells you to do that. You're only looking for the bad stuff. Okay? For instance, when I got here, I had a couple of assets. All right. I had one. I was always kind to my elders, always, and so that was about the only asset I had. But my point is, it doesn't matter how many assets you have. When you go through the inventory process, you're not going to lose that. When you come out of the end of the inventory process, you're still going to be kind to elders or whatever your asset is. So there's no reason to inventory good stuff. The first time it asks us to inventory good stuff is actually in step 10. In step 10 in the 12 and 12, second paragraph says a continuous look at our assets and liabilities. The first time in the program is telling us to look to inventory good stuff. Because by the 10th step, we want to be able to gauge how we've grown, you know? So when I came here, I had a list of liabilities and a little bit of assets. And as I stayed sober and continued on the spiritual path, my list went like this, which is what was supposed to happen for you. Okay? So now going back to the space in between here is all you need, because when you're doing an inventory list, okay, like any other list, any other inventory stuff you're doing on any step, especially the fourth step, you want to do like a shopping list, okay? A shopping list like before you leave the house, you go, okay, I need coffee, I need butter, I need milk, I need eggs, right? You don't write on your shopping list, I need coffee because I like to have coffee first thing in the morning. I need eggs because I got to have breakfast. You don't do that, right? You just write down, you make a shopping list. So that's the way we're going to inventory here. And if you go to page 65, I believe, let's see, yes, 65, there's an example. There's 3 columns there. And before the 3 columns, it says we were usually as definite as this example. So how much do you write on your fourth step? There's your answer right there. You keep it bare bone. Okay? No great expanding on language or anything like that. Just write down bullet points. That's what you have to do. Now, if you go over to page, let's see, I think it's page 67. Let me see. Yes. Go over to page 67. The second paragraph says, referring to our list again, putting out of our minds the wrongs others had done, we resolutely look for our own mistakes. Where had we been selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, and frightened? You see that there? I took those 2 sentences and made columns 4 and 5. And if you look at column 4, the writing there is exactly what it says here. And on column 5, it's the same thing. Okay? So what I did was, because it says to referring to our list again. So even though there's 3 columns here, it's telling us to go back to those 3 columns. And the reason I broke down those 2 sentences into 2 separate columns, you'll see as we go through the process how much sense it makes. But that's where these 2 columns come from. So instead of you having 3 columns and having to go back and referring to that list, you have the 5 columns right in front of you. It's so much simpler, so much easier, and much more accurate to go over. Does that make sense to you? Okay. So now that I told you all that, you can put these away because we're not going to use them today. And if I have an example to give you, I have one blown up set that you can see from. So again, I've sent these have been all over the country, they've been all over the world, and some people have changed them. So you might have seen some that have changed, but these are the ones that I made almost 30 years ago. And they work real well. So let's finish talking about what we don't want to do in the 4th step. We don't want to do a life story. We're not writing a life story. Nowhere in the book it tells us that. I said to you that it's not about inventorying good stuff, right? It's inventorying. So Go to page 64. Second paragraph down, it says, we did exactly the same thing with our lives. We took stock honestly. First, we searched out the flaws in our makeup, which caused our failure. So that's what we're looking for, flaws. I've shared this with you before. In step 4, Bill used the word flaws. And step 5, he uses the word wrongs. In step 6, he uses the word defects. In step 7, he uses the word shortcomings. And somebody asked him once, what's the difference between a defect and a shortcoming? And Bill's answer was real simple. He said, there is no difference. I just didn't want to keep using the same word. So what we're looking for is our wrongs. The purpose of the 4th step is to figure out the exact nature of our wrong. Through this inventory process, you're going to be able to pinpoint exactly where your anger comes from, exactly where your fear comes from, exactly where your sexual deviations come from, and exactly where you harm other people, where that comes from. And so those are the 4 things that's going to ask us to inventory. And let's just go over those, because some people don't think that we inventory 4 things. Some people actually inventory resentment. Some people inventory resentments and fears, and that's about it. On page 64, on the bottom of the page, the last paragraph, resentment is the #1 offender. It destroys more alcoholics than anything else. From it stem all forms of spiritual disease. For we have been not only mentally and physically ill, we have been spiritually sick. When the spiritual malady is overcome, we straighten out mentally and physically. In dealing with resentments, we set them on paper. So right there, it's telling us to write down resentments, right? Go to page 67. I'm sorry, 68. Top of the page, first paragraph says, we reviewed our fears thoroughly. We put them on paper, even though we had no resentment in connection with them. So right there is telling us to write down our fears. Page 69, first paragraph. We reviewed our conduct over the years past. Where have we been selfish, dishonest, or inconsiderate? Whom had we hurt? Did we unjustifiably arouse jealousy, suspicion, bitterness? Where were we at fault? What should we have done instead? We got this all down on paper. So right there, it's telling us, again, to write down. And I don't know if you noticed, but ironically, the sexual inventory is on page 69.
Yes.
Listen, I didn't write the book, people. I just reporting the news, okay? You've heard there's an old AA joke. There's an old AA joke where the newcomer is having some issues in that area, and he talks to his sponsor. So his sponsor says, go home tonight and read page 69 and call me. So by the time the meeting's over and by the time the newcomer gets home, he screws it up. And instead of going to page 69, he goes over to page 96. Go to page 96. He starts reading. He says, do not be discouraged if your prospect does not respond at once. Search out another alcoholic and try again. You are sure to find someone desperate enough to accept with eagerness what you offer. So he calls his sponsor up. He goes, I love this program. We're not talking cured here. Yeah. And page 70, go to page 70. Towards the bottom of the page. Says, we have begun to comprehend the fertility and fatality. We have commenced to see their terrible destructiveness. We've begun to learn tolerance, patience, and goodwill toward men, even our enemies, for we look on them as sick people. We have listed the people we have hurt by our conduct. So there is telling us to write down the people we have hurt. So your resentments, your fears, your sexual conduct, and your harms to others are the 4 things you're going to inventory. Hence, you have 4 pages here, 1 for each. So I don't know how many resentments you have, but I'm going to wager that you got more than 7 of them. So you probably need to make some copies. And same thing with fears and so on. Okay. Is there a tissue here or something? I want to erase what I wrote up here. Thank you. Okay, so I don't know if you read this. It says faith is not belief without proof, but trust without reservation. So much for that. Oh, let's see.
Oh, God.
Damn it.
Now you need a pen?
I need a marker. After the meeting, if you don't mind. Thank you. Oh, there's an eraser here.
Yeah, and in case you mess up, there's an eraser.
Okay. I don't need an eraser. I don't make mistakes.
Sure.
All right, we left off on page 63. Bottom of the page. Does anybody got any, before we move on, does anybody got any questions on the third step that we went over? Hopefully that helped you with that. Okay, next we launched on a course of vigorous action, the first step of which is a personal house cleaning. Now, some people believe that the writing on our steps begin in step 4. I don't believe that. It doesn't say here that for the first time, it's just telling us next week we launched on a course of vigorous action. I believe we write on every step. So, and I find it helpful to do so. Page 64, though our decision was a vital and crucial step, it could have little permanent effect unless at once, followed by a strenuous effort to face and be rid of the things which have been blocking us. Our liquor was but a symptom, so we had to get down to causes and conditions. Now, I want to tell you this, and I don't mean to confuse you, but it may sound a little confusing. Causes and conditions is the same thing as the manifestations of self. Okay? So when we say the way self has manifested, we're talking the same thing as if we're talking about causes and conditions. Okay? Now, the cause is on page 62. Selfishness, self-centeredness. That we think is the root of our trouble. So that is the cause. Now, the condition of that cause, as far as we're concerned, are 4 things. The first condition of that cause is resentment. The next condition of that cause is fear. The next condition of that cause is sexual deviations. And then finally, the harms we do other people. Those are the conditions of the cause. Those are also the way self has manifested with us. There's no difference between cause and condition and the manifestation of self. Okay, he's just wording it differently. So he says, all right. So he says, therefore, we started upon a personal inventory. This was step 4. And so Bill gives us a brilliant example. It's a business, right? And he tells us if you have a business and you don't inventory, you're going to go broke. Okay. So what he says here, a business which takes no regular inventory usually goes broke. Taking a commercial inventory is a fact finding. So we're going to put this here. Fact finding. And a fact facing process. So we'll put that here. Fact-finding, fact-facing. It is an effort to discover the truth. So here we're going to put the truth. About the stock in trade, okay? So the stock in trade, whatever your business is, you have a stock in trade. Right? You have a clothing store, your stock in trade is your pants and your tops, and if you have a restaurant, your food is, whatever your business is, you have what your stock in trade is. One object is disclosed damaged or unsaleable goods. So we're going to put that here, damaged. Unsaleable, damaged. And to get rid of them promptly without regret. So we're going to finish it off with that, right? Promptly without regret. So this is the example Bill gives us of a business inventory. Okay? Now let's go over, because what he says to us here, if the owner of the business is to be successful, he cannot fool himself about values. Now look what he says. We did exactly the same thing with our lives. Oh, shit.
I don't mess up.
Okay, so. Okay, we did exactly the same thing with our lives, he says. So now go over to page 59. And let's read what the fourth step says. Made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. So searching would be the same as fact finding, isn't it? And fearless would be the same as fact facing. Because in order to face the facts, you have to be fearless. And moral inventory, if you look up the word moral, one of the definitions you're going to understand moral to be is the truth. Right. Truth. Okay, so now what is the stock in trade if it's a personal inventory? So this is the business inventory. This is the personal inventory. What is the stock in trade for your personal inventory? It's your thinking. Your thinking. Okay? And the damaged or unsaleable goods is what? It's our flawed thinking. Okay? And we're going to do the same thing with the personal inventory that we did with the business inventory. We're going to get rid of it promptly and without regret. You see that? Does that make sense to you guys? So that's a perfect example of what Bill has given us in the business inventory. And then he says we did exactly the same thing with our lives. So here, now I want to take a minute to talk about something that I find very important. It's the four absolutes. Now, the four absolutes, if you're not familiar with them, it's something that the Oxford Group used, and it's one of the few things that Bill really liked about the Oxford Group was the four absolutes, and they are this: absolute honesty, absolute purity, absolute unselfishness, and absolute love. Yes, absolute honesty, absolute purity, absolute unselfishness, and absolute love. And here's the question to ask for each one. Absolute honesty. Is it true or is it false? You want to write this down. Absolute honesty. Is it true or is it false? Absolute purity. Is it right or is it wrong? Absolute unselfishness. How will it affect others? And absolute love. Is it ugly or is it beautiful? And of course, we're talking about our thinking and our actions, right? Yeah. So absolute honesty, is it right or is it wrong? Absolute purity, is it uh, is it true? Is it false? Is it right or is it wrong? Absolute unselfishness, how will it affect others? Absolute love, is it ugly or is it beautiful? Is what you're thinking or what you're doing, is it ugly or is it beautiful? So these are good guidelines for you to always, if you're aware of the four absolutes, you can always at any point stop yourself and ask yourself, is what I'm doing or what I'm thinking about doing, is this something? If you run the four absolutes through there and you have a negative to any one of them, you should stop and not do it. So if you're going to check your motives, you need four positive answers to those things. Absolute honesty, yes. Absolute purity, yes. Absolute unselfishness, yes. Absolute love, yes. If you answer yes, 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 you're on the right track.
Grant wanted to know if you needed to do it every time. Oh, okay.
All right. So there's that. And then the next thing I want to go over is also very important. It covers it deeply in the 12 and 12, but your sheets also, a very important part of your inventory, is column 3. Now, column 3 talks about the 3 basic instincts of life. Okay? And I want to tell you now that every problem you've ever had, every problem you're ever going to have, ever, is directly related to 1, 2, or all 3 of the basic instincts of life. Now, these basic instincts of life are God-given, therefore good. Only problem is we're going to take a look at how we walk them. Okay? And they're in no particular order, but the first one is, if you look on your street, is the social instinct. Well, each one of these we have broken down into 2 categories on the third, but the social instinct is the first of the 3 basic instincts. And what does that mean, a social instinct? God instilled in each of us the desire to be liked and respected. Okay? That's a God-given instinct that everybody is born with. The desire to be liked and respected. Why did God give us that? Well, because if he didn't instill that in us, then we wouldn't give a shit about what we do to anybody, and eventually we'd wind up killing each other. And the human race would cease to exist. Right? The next instinct is the security instinct. Now, this is another God-given instinct. God instilled in us this security instinct. Everybody is born with the desire to be secure in their person, right? So we seek shelter. We wear clothing to protect us from the weather, right? And those are things we do because we want to be secure, okay? And God gave us that instinct because if not, we would die from the elements. And eventually the human race would cease to exist. So he instilled in us a security instinct. The third instinct, basic instinct God gave us, obviously, is the sexual instinct, right? And God gave us that so we would continue to produce reproduce, right? Okay. Because if sex was burdensome and boring and a pain in the neck, I almost said a pain in the ass, but that that's only in Greece. But, um, but if sex was burdensome and you know we wouldn't want to do it. You know, I come home and oh no, sex, right? So if we didn't have sex, we wouldn't reproduce, and eventually the human race would cease to exist. So you see how important and the right way that God gave us these basic instincts. They're all God given and good. Now let's go back and look at how we fucked them up. Yeah. Trying to think of a nice way to say that, but no, that one calls for the F word. Because we really warped this stuff, right? So the social instinct, right, is God gave us the desire to be liked and respected. Well, you're not liking me and respecting me as much as I think you should, or as quick as you should. So therefore, I'm going to take a shortcut and do some things to make you like and respect me. A shortcut, we come to find out in life, a shortcut is the quickest way to get somewhere you didn't want to go. If you remember before GPS and everything, right? He's driving somewhere. Yeah, I know a shortcut. An hour later, you're trying to get back to the road you're supposed to be on. But so how do I do that? Like so, I give you an example. When I was in the fourth grade, I was in class one day and we were on the second floor and we were sitting on the windowsill, a bunch of us, and a substitute teacher came in and she said, "Everybody take your seats." And everybody got up except for me. And she said, "Take your seat." And I said, "Don't take another step. I'll jump out the window." We were on the second floor. She didn't know that underneath the window was the awning to the entrance of the school. Well, it was about a half a story down, right? But she didn't know that. She just thought we were on the second. So she kept watching. "Don't take another step." And I put my legs out the window. She said, "Get your seat." And I said, "That's it." And I went, "Oh." And I jumped out and I landed on the awning. And I climbed down and I came back up the steps. And she was like, almost fainted. Like, our student jumped out the window, right? But I mean, that's just the kind of stupid shit that I did because I wanted everybody to like and respect me, right? Go figure, right? I mean, I didn't know it then, but looking back now on stuff like that, lots of things like that, I will act out and take shortcuts so you will like and respect me.
We call that manipulation.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm saying exactly. That's why I'm saying this is how we warp that basic instinct, right? And there's lots of other ways of doing that. I just gave you one example. The security instinct. How do we warp that? Well, I've got a house, so you've got a bigger. My lawn's okay, but your lawn is beautiful. Or maybe I'm walking by and I see the store. I see all those shoes in the window. I'm a shoe guy. Oh, I like those shoes. I got 50 pair of shoes, huh? I don't need those shoes. So I do things that has nothing to do with being secure, but it is in the security instinct, right? God gave us that instinct to protect ourselves from the elements, but He didn't tell me that I needed to have 80 pair of shoes, right? So, but these are the kind of ways that we warp these this thing. And again, that's just one example. There's many different examples. The sexual instinct is it's easy how we warp that. Thank you. Because usually we're going to wind up in the wrong place with the wrong person or persons at the wrong time. And it's got nothing to do with the sexual instinct. Most guys come into recovery thinking that we're we're horny little guys and we're over sexual, but really when we get down to the inventory, we find out that we're really actually under secure rather than over sexual. And that's just something that becomes a stark reality for us. Thank you. So, I want to say this to you. When we get to the sexual inventory part, and we'll go over it more deeply then, but it's the only part of the inventory process that has nothing to do with the actions. Okay, I had a sponsee, and I swear you can't make this up, years ago, and he handed me this sexual inventory sheet, and I sat down and I read this, and I went, "Wow, this is really good erotica." I said, "But it has nothing to do with the fourth step, though, because this is really good writing." Because he was like, I was pounding my neighbor's wife on the kitchen table as the rain beat on my window. I swear that's what he gave me. And I was like, "What is the matter with you?" I said, "You should write erotica, but this is not the fourth step." When we get to the sexual inventory part, we're going to see what it tells us. It's not about the action. And we can't, let's just quickly go over there so it makes sense to you. Go to page 69. Actually, it's on page 68, the bottom page 68. Now about sex. Many of us needed an overhauling there. So my question to you is, can I overhaul a sexual act from last week? No. Can I overhaul a sexual act from last night? How about from 10 years ago? No. It's impossible, right? So if we need an overhauling there, it's not about the action part. It's about the mental part. So it's not about, when we get to the sexual inventory, it's not about who's in my bed, but rather what's in my head. So in other words, the important thing wasn't him pounding his neighbor's wife on the kitchen table. The important thing is what lack of morals allowed him to be with his neighbor's wife. That's the important thing. Okay. So we'll go in a little deeper in that when we get to the sexual part. So what we're doing in the fourth step really is we're taking a look. It's kind of like going home and cleaning out your closet and all your bureau drawers and everything and pulling out all this stuff and throwing it on the floor, on the bed and going, okay, but because we have a tendency, if you're anything like me, is that, oh, I love that shirt, Well, I bought that 10 years ago. It don't fit me no more, One day I'll lose weight. I'm going to keep it and put it back in. No, so the fourth step is taking a look at what we need to get rid of. And we start getting rid of it in 5 and 6 and 7. Okay, but all we're doing in the fourth step is taking a look and things in their right perspective. Okay. Okay, so remember, let's go back for just a minute to step 3. What I told you was the important thing of the third step was, or it says, though our decision was a violent, crucial step, it could have little permanent effect unless at once followed by a strenuous effort to face and be rid of the things in ourselves which have been blocking us. What that means is that the third step is only good enough to last for you to start writing. So if you start writing on your inventory and you stop, and tomorrow or the next day you pick it up and start again, if you do not do the third step before you start writing again, you're not doing a fearless and moral inventory. You're doing a fearful and untruth inventory because God's not part of it. So each time you start writing on the fourth step, you need to do the third step and bring God back into it.
What do you mean by do the third step?
The-
The prayer?
Whatever your prayer was,
Okay.
whatever your prayer was, or just as simply as, God, just get God centered and bring God into the 4-step writing, because that's the only way you can do a fearless and moral inventory.
So like set aside prayer.
Set aside prayer is a good one. The fake it till you make it prayer, another one. Or you could just simply ask God to be with you as you go over this, as you write. Okay. So the book is directing us to look at causes and conditions rather than the symptoms. Right? Because I think I said to you a few weeks ago, the steps do not address the symptoms. The steps don't address the symptom. The steps address the problem. All right, so let's go back to page 64. Now, here's bottom of the page. It says, when the spiritual malady is overcome, we straighten out mentally and physically. In dealing with resentments, we set them on paper. We listed people, institutions, or principles with whom we were angry. I want to tell you, this is a huge mistake that lots and lots and lots of people make. They believe that's a choice. We listed people, institutions, or principles. That is not a choice. Or principles is not a choice. Institutions or principles. Oh, I think I'll do institutions. No. It's not, that's not that word or does not mean that in that context. It means that if you have a resentment with institutions or if you have a resentment with principles. Now, here's the thing. Me personally, I have not gotten any more spiritual growth out of my inventories than I did in inventorying principles.
Mm-hmm.
So,
So really, it shouldn't say or, it should say and.
no, or is fine. Or is fine. When it says or, all it means institutions or principles. It's telling you to write down. We listed people, we listed institutions, we listed principles. The word or is not a choice in that context. That's all you got to know. I'm going to tell you. Yeah, I'm going to tell you exactly what. It's a good question because a lot of people don't know. The steps do not address symptoms. Because what on page 64, what does it say there? The top of the page? Our liquor is but a symptom. So a principle is this, and you might want to write this down because I can't stress to you how important inventorying principles are. A principle is a moral, a value, or a belief. A moral, a value, or a belief. That's what a principle is. Now, there's two types of principles. There's generic principles, which means that lots and lots of people have the same kind of principle. And there's personal principles, which means that you may not be the only one to have it, but it's not a huge amount of people that have it. And this is everything else. Listen, when you get to the resentment inventory, there's no need to spend time trying to think who you're mad at. It never makes sense. People go, listen, if you can't remember who you're mad at, guess what? You're not mad at them. Move on. Right? And when it gets to the fear inventory, the same thing applies. Don't waste time trying to think what you're afraid of. What am I afraid of? What am I afraid of? If you're afraid of something, you know it, write it down, right? But when it comes to principles, this requires some thinking. This requires some sharing with a friend or a sponsor or somebody, or a spiritual advisor, somebody. You need help with this. So a generic principle would be, let's say, moral value or belief. Let's say men don't cry. Okay, that's a generic principle. Lots of men have heard that and believe that, their whole life. Okay. Now I'm going to share with you a personal principle I had when I got here. Don't hate on me. 'Cause I'm being openly honest with you tonight. When I got here, I was 33 years old. When I got here. Yeah. 67, now 33, yes. So when I got here, I really believed, I honest to God believed, that the more women I could take to bed, the more of a man I am. Nobody ever told me that. The more women I go to bed with, the more of a man I am. Now, it's not generic, but I'm not certainly not the only one that has that. But I may be one of the only ones that are willing to share it today. But now, let's talk about this because it's very important. Because when I got here, I did not have a resentment in connection with that. I thought it was a good thing. I really did. I didn't have no fear connected to it. For what? Did it belong in my sexual inventory? Probably not. What you're going to find out is that almost every one of your sexual deviations have nothing to do with the sexual instinct. Did you hear what I just said? Okay, remember that. Almost all of your sexual deviation has nothing to do with the sexual instinct. So did my principle belong in my sexual inventory? No. I didn't have a resentment. I didn't have no fear connected to it, and it didn't have anything to do with my sexual basic instinct. But I can honestly say to myself, I harmed people, believing that. I really did. And so that went in my harms to others as a principle. And I want to tell you something. I got so much spiritual growth out of inventorying my principles. And I really didn't even know I had principles. Because we never used that word growing up where I come from. This is the way we are. This is why we do these things, right? But anyway, you come in here and you learn that this is a principle, is a moral, a value, or belief, and everything you've ever done and you're ever going to do is based on your basic instincts and your principles, or your lack of principles. Like the example I tell you with the guy who wrote that erotica sexual inventory, that was about a lack of principle for him. So I encourage you, and I don't care how long you've been sober, if you've never done this and you do it now, you're going to really gain something from it. I encourage you to take time and think about what are some of your principles? What are these things that you grew up with that are embedded in you? A moral, a value, a belief. There's hundreds and thousands of them. I don't know what they could be, what yours could be, but it's worth exploring. It's certainly worth exploring. Okay? Anybody got any questions on that? When I grew, I'll tell you where I got my warped principle growing up. Nobody ever told me that, but I watched my dad and my uncles and everybody in my life, all my mentors. I watched them. They all had wives and they all had girlfriends, and they would step out with their girlfriends and they'd go home to their wives. I watched that over and over and over again growing up, and somehow my sick brain, my flawed thinking. That's what we got here, flawed thinking. My flawed thinking calculated that to be, this is what makes you a man. Because these people were men. My dad, my uncles, these people were men. I looked up to them. They were my gods. And no, I didn't know. And that's how it comes out. When you have feelings and emotions and you don't know how to label them and deal with them. This shit comes out sideways, people. You know, this shit comes out sideways. So anyway, that's so important. I want you guys to spend a little time this week thinking about some principles that you may have. Okay. Now let's go back then. So the first thing we're going to look at is resentment. Oh, you know what? If you don't have no principles to live by, you got no reasons to live. I like that. Okay. So we talked about the three basic instincts. Anybody got any questions on those? They're going to have everything to do with your inventory moving forward from yes. So you putting me on your fourth step? You won't be the first person to put me on. I'll tell you. I know. I know. Yeah. Yes. If you have a resentment, you have a resentment. It doesn't matter who and where it came from, you know, or how it came about. And you know, the principles. If you're looking at your own principles, they might not belong in the resentment column. They might belong in the fear column. You know, they might belong in the sexual, very rarely sexual, but harms to others, where mine was. But yes, personal, and I shared with you my personal one. And generic, I shared with you is like men don't cry. That's a kind of generic one. Or women are supposed to.
Stay at home and cook and clean.
You said it, not me. Thank you, Kelly.
I think I still have it. Do you still, where you gave example of institutions?
Yeah.
principal?
I have it in my briefcase, and I need somebody to make some copies of it. You can make more copies? Okay. I'll send it to you. Yeah, it is. It is. I have it in there. Okay. So the first thing we're going to inventory is resentments. Oh, years ago, I looked this up. I looked up the word wrongs in the dictionary years ago. And I came out with, there's lots of answers, but I came out with these three very interesting answers. Incorrect judgment of other people. Incorrect judgment of other people. We're going to find out a little bit later on that's exactly what a resentment is. Incorrect judgment of other people. Resentment is wrong judgment. Another definition was incorrect believing. And we're going to find out that that's what most of our fears are. Fear is wrong believing. And the other definition for wrongs is those things we do to hurt other people. And that, of course, is going to be our harms to others.
Repeat the second.
Yes. Incorrect believing, which is wrong beliefs is fears. Wrong actions is harms to others, and wrong judgment is resentments. Okay, the word resentment. Let's just break that down real quick into the root origin of the word. Two Latin words. R-E, means again. And I'm not sure how you spell it, but the word sentare, I think it's S-E-N-T-A-R-Y, I'm not sure though, means to feel. To feel. So the root origin of the word resentment actually means to feel again. And again. And again.
And then obsess.
And then obsess. Yeah, exactly. But so it's interesting to know the root origin of these words because they come back to help us understand what we're looking at. So resentment is to feel again. And what does that mean? So when I go out, when I get up in the morning, I'm pretty spiritual. I'm pretty good. And then I got to go out and deal with you son of bitches, right? And I'll come up to Lisa, and Lisa's always got a smart ass comment to make. And I'll do is I'll take that comment and I'll put it in the computer and I'll replay that all day. And every time I replay it, I become a little more right. She becomes a little more wrong, and I get a little angrier. And then I see Ricky, and sometimes Ricky don't even have to say nothing. She gives one of those looks, right? I know what she's thinking. Son of a bitch. And I lock that look into the brain, and I replay that all day long. Each time I think about that, I become more right. She becomes more wrong. And so when I'm feeling this again and again and again. Now, I don't want to minimize or discount anybody that's been a victim of something, but the truth of the matter is most people were victims once upon a time. I know lots of people that were molested when they were children, and that's a horrible, horrific thing. But it happened when they were 10 and they're 35 now. And for the last 25 years, they have not been a victim, they've been a volunteer to the pain by feeling it again and again and again and again for decades. That's what happens with these resentments. So we're going to get into that a little more next week. We are halfway through the study. We're going to do 2 more weeks on step 4, and then we'll knock the rest of the stuff off. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.